The stars burned cold and distant as Captain Day-One stood in the observation deck of the Eternal Hope. His reflection stared back at him from the reinforced glass. A man who still believed the galaxy operated on logic and fairness. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, unaware that everything was about to change. They had traveled for 6 months to reach this place, responding to the Galactic Council's invitation with hope in their hearts. Earth had finally been acknowledged. Humanity would take its place among the civilized species of the universe. The Valara Prime Station stretched across the viewport like a metal city in space. Ships from 1,000 worlds docked at its ports, each representing civilizations that had mastered the stars long before humans discovered fire. Day-One had spent weeks preparing his presentation, detailing humanity's achievements, culture, and desire for peaceful cooperation. He carried data files containing Earth's history, art, and scientific progress. He wanted them to see humans as equals, as partners worthy of respect. The council chamber was vast beyond imagination. Representatives from 847 species filled the circular space, arranged in tiers that rose toward a domed ceiling showing the galaxy itself. Some delegates floated in containment fields filled with exotic gases. Others stood on platforms adjusted for their gravity needs. A few existed as pure energy, contained in crystalline matrices. Day-One felt incredibly small as he walked to the central platform designated for speakers. High Arbiter Thelvan presided over the assembly from an elevated throne. The Morvati were an ancient race, their skin like polished stone, their eyes containing the weight of millennia. Thelvan's voice filled the chamber without technological amplification, a deep resonance that seemed to vibrate in the bones. He welcomed Day-One with words that sounded formal and rehearsed, as if humanity's fate had already been decided before this meeting began. Day-One presented his case with passion. He spoke of Earth's diversity, of how humans had overcome their own conflicts to reach for the stars. He showed them music and poetry, mathematical theories and medical advances. He emphasized humanity's potential, their adaptability, their drive to learn and grow. The council listened in silence. No questions were asked. No expressions changed on the alien faces watching him. When he finished, Thelvan thanked him and dismissed him from the platform. What followed made Day-One's blood run cold. Thelvan called for a vote on Resolution 7734, which he read aloud for the assembly. The resolution classified humanity as a servitor species, beings whose biological and cultural value was deemed insufficient for independent status. The language was clinical, stripped of emotion. Humans lacked natural armor, advanced sensory organs, or extended lifespans. They possessed no unique abilities that granted them protection under council law. Their technology was primitive, their society fractured by internal divisions. Therefore, humanity would serve the greater galactic community through labor and service. Day-One rushed back to the platform, shouting objections. His translator device struggled to keep up with his rapid words. He demanded to know what right the council had to make such a judgment. He pointed out that humans had never harmed any council species, had come in peace seeking friendship. His protests were ignored. Guards moved toward him, tall beings in powered armor that hummed with contained violence. Day-One backed away, his hands raised, still pleading for them to reconsider. The vote proceeded with mechanical efficiency. Each species had one representative who would cast their decision. The display screens showed the tally in real time. Every single vote came back the same. Approve. 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 847 species voted to enslave humanity. The count was unanimous. Not one voice spoke in humanity's defense. Not one civilization offered mercy or doubt. The council had decided, and the decision was final. Day-One was escorted back to his ship under armed guard. His crew saw his face and knew immediately that something terrible had happened. He ordered them to return to Earth at maximum speed, to warn everyone to prepare defenses. But the council had anticipated this. As the Eternal Hope cleared the station, dozens of warships appeared from nowhere, their stealth fields dropping to reveal an armada that had been waiting all along. The humans had never had a choice. This had always been an ambush disguised as diplomacy. Admiral Hana received Day-One's desperate transmission while commanding the defense fleet near Mars. She had 300 ships under her command. The pride of Earth's military, vessels built with the best technology humanity could muster. She ordered immediate battle stations and moved to intercept the incoming Council fleet. Her tactical display showed the numbers and her heart sank. 300 human ships faced 3,000 alien warships, each one centuries more advanced than anything Earth had produced. The battle was brief and brutal. Human weapons scored hits but caused minimal damage against alien shields. Council weapons tore through human hulls like paper. Hana watched ship after ship explode on her screens, each one carrying hundreds of crew members. She ordered evasive maneuvers, trying to buy time for Earth to evacuate civilians, but there was nowhere to evacuate to. The Council controlled the space around every human colony, every station, every outpost. Hana's flagship took a direct hit that killed half her bridge crew. Emergency systems kept her alive long enough to see the Council fleet break through the defensive line and begin orbital bombardment of military targets on Earth. She gave the order to retreat, knowing it was futile, knowing most of her ships would never make it. Her last transmission before her ship was destroyed was a warning to all humanity: fight if you can, hide if you must, remember everything. This is not the end. The invasion of Earth took 72 hours. Council troops landed in every major city simultaneously. They used non-lethal weapons at first, stunning technology that left humans conscious but paralyzed. The goal was not extermination but capture. Humans were valuable as workers, not as corpses. Processing centers were established in requisitioned stadiums and convention halls. Families were separated with ruthless efficiency. Children were taken to educational facilities where they would be trained in useful skills. Adults were categorized based on physical capability and mental aptitude. Tai Yang was an engineer working in Seoul when the soldiers came. He tried to fight, throwing whatever he could find at the armored figures entering his apartment. A stun beam dropped him instantly. He woke up in a transport ship heading off-world, cramped in a cargo hold with thousands of other humans. The conditions were barely survivable. They were given minimal food and water, enough to keep them alive but nothing more. Tai Yang spent the journey memorizing every detail of the ship's interior, studying the technology keeping them imprisoned. Dr. Yuna was taken from a hospital where she had been treating injured resistance fighters. She was classified as medically skilled and shipped to a facility on Thresh 4. The aliens needed doctors who understood human biology to keep their new slaves healthy and productive. Yuna complied on the surface, doing her job efficiently. But at night, when she was alone in her assigned quarters, she studied the alien anatomy text she had been given. She noted weaknesses in their immune systems, vulnerabilities in their physiology. She made no physical notes, committing everything to memory. Yun was a soldier who had fought in the Earth Defense Forces. He survived the initial battle and led a guerrilla resistance for 3 weeks before being captured. Instead of being executed, he was conscripted into a penal legion. The Council used human soldiers as cannon fodder in their wars against other species. Yun was sent to the front lines of conflicts he did not understand, fighting enemies who had done nothing to him. He learned to survive where others died. He watched and learned how the aliens fought, how they organized, where their tactics showed weakness. On Earth itself, occupation forces established control with overwhelming power. Governor General Vector of the Korthan species took command. He announced that cooperation would be rewarded and resistance would be punished. Humans who accepted their new status would receive adequate food and housing. Those who fought would be eliminated. Most humans, traumatized and defeated, complied, but not all. In the ruins of bombed cities, in the countryside where surveillance was lighter, humans began to organize. Mirai had been a teacher before the invasion. She had watched her school burn, had seen her students taken away in transport ships. Something inside her hardened into steel that day. She gathered survivors in hidden basements and abandoned factories. She taught them to appear broken while staying strong inside. She organized networks of communication using old technology the aliens considered too primitive to monitor. She spread a simple message to every human she could reach: survive, learn, remember, wait. The first year of occupation was the hardest. Humans died by the millions from overwork, malnutrition, and despair. Some took their own lives rather than live as slaves. Others simply gave up, becoming hollow shells that performed their tasks without thought or feeling. But others, like Taeyang, Yuna, Hyun, and Mirai, refused to break. They endured every humiliation, every beating, every loss, and in their hearts they nurtured something the Council had failed to recognize. Not hope for mercy or rescue, but hatred, cold and patient, waiting for its chance to burn everything down. 20 years passed like a slow death for humanity. An entire generation grew up knowing nothing but servitude under alien masters. Children born in captivity learned to speak alien languages before their own. They worked in factories and fields before they could write their names. The Council considered this a success, evidence that humans were adapting to their proper place in the galactic order. They failed to notice the darkness growing behind human eyes, a rage so deep it had become part of their DNA. Tae-young had aged badly in the asteroid mines of Sector 9. His body was covered in scars from industrial accidents and overseer punishments. His hair had gone gray despite being only 43 years old. But his mind remained sharp, sharper perhaps than before. Every day for 20 years he had studied the technology around him. The mining equipment, the transport ships, the communication systems, the weapons the guards carried. He had memorized every circuit, every power coupling, every design flaw. The aliens made a critical mistake. They assumed humans were too primitive to understand advanced technology. They let human technicians repair equipment under minimal supervision. They allowed human engineers to maintain systems they considered simple. Tae-young used this access carefully. He never stole anything large. A broken power cell here, a damaged circuit board there, pieces of scrap metal destined for recycling. Over 20 years, he accumulated enough components to build a hidden workshop in an abandoned mine shaft. He was not alone in his efforts. Across the galaxy, thousands of human engineers, scientists, and technicians were doing the same thing. They communicated through coded messages hidden in work reports and maintenance logs. A seemingly random series of numbers in a repair document actually contained coordinates. A pattern of equipment failures spelled out instructions. The aliens never noticed. They saw only obedient slaves performing their assigned tasks. Dr. Yuna had become one of the most valuable medical assets on Thresh Fur. She could treat injuries and diseases in 17 different species. The aliens trusted her with sensitive information about their biology, their genetics, their weaknesses. She had access to research databases that detailed every known sentient species in Council space. She absorbed it all, never asking suspicious questions, always appearing grateful for the opportunity to learn. At night, Yuna worked on her true project. She used medical scanners to analyze genetic samples she had carefully collected. A drop of blood from a Morvathi patient, skin cells from a Yaishari telepathic healer, tissue samples from Korthan warriors who came for treatment. She studied their immune responses, their cellular structures, their reproductive systems. She identified vulnerabilities that could be exploited, diseases that might jump species barriers, toxins that would affect aliens but leave humans unharmed. Her research was meticulous and patient. She made no written records, storing everything in her memory through techniques she had developed. She shared her findings through the same hidden network that Tae-young used. Other human doctors in other facilities contributed their own discoveries. Together they built a library of biological warfare possibilities, waiting for the day when humanity would need such weapons. Yun should have died 100 times over. The Penal Legion sent humans into battles where survival was not expected. They were shock troops, meant to absorb the first wave of enemy fire while alien soldiers advanced behind them. Hyun watched thousands of his fellow humans die in wars they did not understand against enemies they had never met. But he survived through skill, cunning, and an absolute refusal to die before completing his revenge. The aliens made another mistake with Hyun. They assumed human soldiers were disposable, but they still needed those soldiers to be effective. So they trained them. They taught humans how to use plasma rifles and energy shields. They showed them tactics for urban warfare and orbital assaults. They transformed humans into soldiers capable of fighting with advanced technology. Hyun absorbed these lessons and added his own innovations, combining human adaptability with alien weapons. He became a legend among the Penal Legions. Other humans looked to him for leadership. Hyun trained them secretly, teaching them not just to follow orders but to think strategically. He organized them into units that protected each other. He kept them alive when possible and taught them to learn from every battle. The aliens saw only an unusually effective Penal Legion. They never suspected they were creating an army that would one day turn against them. On Earth, Mirai had built something remarkable. The occupation forces thought they controlled the planet completely. They saw humans working in factories, farming in agricultural zones, living in assigned housing blocks. What they did not see was the shadow government operating beneath their notice. Mirai had connected resistance cells across every continent. She used runners who memorized messages rather than writing them down. She employed codes based on human literature and history that aliens could not decipher. The factories producing goods for alien markets had a dual purpose. During the day, they manufactured exactly what the overseers demanded. At night, human workers retooled the equipment to produce weapons and armor. These items were hidden in false walls and buried in sealed containers. Slowly, over 20 years, Earth accumulated an arsenal. It was primitive compared to alien technology, but it was numerous and it was ready. Mireille established secret schools in abandoned subway tunnels and hidden basements. Children learned real human history, not the edited version the aliens provided. They studied science, mathematics, and military tactics. They were taught to hate with precision, to channel their anger into focused determination. Most importantly, they learned to wait. Revenge rushed was revenge wasted. They needed to be ready before they struck. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jinwoo was 23 years old, born 2 years after the invasion. He had been assigned to work as a data clerk in Council archives on Valara Prime. The aliens considered it a safe position for a human, processing historical records and cultural documents. Jinwoo appeared to be the perfect slave, quiet and efficient, never causing trouble. But Jinwoo had a gift for patterns. He noticed connections in the data that others missed. He traced references backward through decades of Council records, and he found it. A classified report from 53 years before the invasion, when humanity had first been detected by Council long-range sensors. The report detailed humanity's rapid technological advancement, their aggressive expansion into their own solar system, their disturbing tendency to innovate under pressure. The report's conclusion was clear. Humanity posed a potential threat to Council stability. They should be monitored closely and, if necessary, suppressed before they could develop into a rival power. The invasion had not been a random decision or a response to human actions. It had been a preemptive strike against a species the Council feared. They had enslaved humanity not because humans were weak, but because they might become strong. Jinwoo copied the report using methods that would not trigger security alerts. He encoded it into a music file, hiding classified data inside seemingly innocent entertainment. He sent it through the communication network, addressing it to random human workers across multiple systems. Within weeks, the truth spread through every slave population. The effect was electric. Humans had wondered what they had done to deserve this fate. Now they knew. They had done nothing. The Council had feared them, and fear had led to chains. The 4 pillars of human resistance, Taeyang, Yuna, Hyun, and Mireille, made contact for the first time through a carefully arranged communication window. They had never met in person, but they had been working toward the same goal. Now they needed to coordinate. The question they debated was simple but profound. Should they seek freedom through negotiation, offering to leave Council space and never return? Or should they take revenge for what had been done to them? Taeyang argued for caution. They had technological innovations but limited resources. A premature strike could lead to complete human extinction. Yuna pointed out that the Council would never let humanity go peacefully. They knew too much about Council technology and weaknesses. Hyun stated the military reality. Human forces were scattered and outnumbered. They needed surprise and coordination to have any chance. Mireille listened to them all, then spoke the words that decided everything. She told them that negotiation was impossible because the Council had revealed its nature. 847 species had voted to enslave humanity, without a single dissenting voice. These were not civilizations that could be reasoned with. They were predators who saw humans as prey. The choice was not between freedom and revenge. The choice was between dying as slaves or fighting to ensure the Council could never do this again to any species. They had to burn it all down, not just for humans, but for everyone who might come after. The others knew she was right. They set a date for the uprising, coordinating across hundreds of systems. They would need 6 months to position assets and prepare final arrangements. Every human in the resistance network received coded instructions. They were told exactly what to do and when to do it. The message emphasized that there could be no mistakes and no mercy. This was not a rebellion. This was extinction warfare. They would not stop until the Council ceased to exist. In those final months, humans across the galaxy made their preparations. Taeyang completed his weapons designs and distributed them through the network. Yuna finished her biological weapons and synthesized the first samples. Hyun positioned his veteran soldiers in key locations. Mireille armed her cells on Earth and synchronized their clocks. Jinwoo prepared to hijack every communication system in Council space. They were ready. And the Council, comfortable in their power, noticed nothing wrong until it was far too late to stop what was coming. The mining colony in the Veklar system operated on a predictable schedule. Shift changes happened at exactly the same time every day. Guards rotated through their posts with mechanical precision. The aliens had perfected the routine of managing slave labor over thousands of years. They never imagined that routine could become a weapon against them. Hyun watched the guard change from his position in the processing center. He had been assigned to this colony 3 months ago, along with 200 other veterans from the penal legions. The guards assumed these were just more disposable human soldiers being given mining duties as punishment. They did not know that every single one of these humans was a trained killer who had survived dozens of battles. They did not know that weapons had been smuggled into the colony piece by piece over the past weeks, and they did not know that in exactly 30 seconds, their comfortable routine would become a massacre. The signal came through a simple cough from a human worker across the room. Hyun's hand moved to the tool belt at his waist. His fingers found the component that did not belong, a power cell that had been modified into a compact explosive. Around him, 200 other hands reached for similar devices. The guards noticed nothing. They were looking at their data pads, reviewing shift reports, thinking about their upcoming rest period. They died without understanding what had happened. The explosion was small but precise, designed to disable shields without bringing down the entire facility. In the confusion that followed, humans moved with practiced efficiency. They seized weapons from the fallen guards. They activated the communication jammers that Tae-Yang had taught them to build. They secured the armory and distributed proper military equipment. Within 20 minutes, the colony was under human control. The aliens were dead or locked in the same cells where humans had been kept. Not one human showed mercy. This was not the time for mercy, but this was not a single rebellion. It was a signal. Across 200 systems in mines and factories and agricultural facilities, humans rose simultaneously. The coordination was perfect because it had been planned for months. Every resistance cell had precise timing. Every human knew their role. The aliens had thought they controlled the galaxy. They learned in a single hour that they controlled nothing. Tae-Yang stood in the engineering bay of an orbital weapons platform above the planet Dracon. He had worked there for 15 years, maintaining systems that the aliens barely understood anymore. They had built these platforms centuries ago and simply expected them to keep working. Tae-Yang had ensured they did keep working, while also ensuring they would work for him when the time came. That time was now. His fingers moved across the control panel with absolute confidence. He had memorized every command sequence, every security override, every failsafe. The platform's main weapon was designed to destroy incoming asteroid threats. It had enough power to crack a small moon. Tae-Yang retargeted it toward the planet's surface, specifically toward the capital city where the colonial government operated. He broadcast a message to all humans in the area, giving them 3 minutes to reach shelter. Then he fired. The beam struck with the force of 1,000 nuclear weapons. The capital city ceased to exist in an instant. 3 million aliens died, including the governor and his entire administrative staff. Tae-Yang felt nothing as he watched the destruction. They had stolen 20 years of his life. They had killed his family. They had made him a slave. This was justice, cold and mathematical. He moved to the next target on his list, a military base 50 kilometers away. He fired again. Across the galaxy, human technicians were doing the same thing. Every platform, every defensive satellite, every weapons system that humans had been trusted to maintain was turned against its owners. Alien ships found themselves targeted by their own defenses. Cities were bombarded from orbit by weapons they had built to protect themselves. The Council's infrastructure became its executioner. Dr. Yuna walked through the medical facility on Thresh 4, carrying a sealed container. The other staff members greeted her normally. She was a familiar sight, always working late, always dedicated to her patients. They did not know what the container held. They did not know that Yuna had spent 2 decades developing the perfect biological weapon. They did not know that in 10 minutes every alien in this facility would be dead while every human remained perfectly healthy. She released the pathogen into the air circulation system. It was invisible, odorless, and incredibly fast-acting. The disease was tailored specifically to thresh physiology, attacking their respiratory systems and nervous systems simultaneously. Within 5 minutes, the first aliens began to collapse. Within 10 minutes, the facility was silent except for the sound of human footsteps. Yuna and her human colleagues moved through the rooms, disconnecting life support systems and ensuring no survivors remained. They felt no guilt. These aliens had used human medical knowledge to keep slaves healthy enough to work. Now that knowledge had killed them. The biological attack was not limited to one facility. Yuna had distributed samples of multiple pathogens through the resistance network. Each disease was designed for a specific alien species, targeting their unique biological vulnerabilities. The Morvathi, who prided themselves on their regenerative abilities, found their own bodies turning against them as the virus corrupted their healing processes. The Ishari telepaths discovered that their mental links transmitted the infection directly into their brains. The Korthans' thick armor could not protect them from diseases that attacked from within. Millions of aliens died in the first day of the uprising. Billions more would die in the weeks to come as the plague spread. Yuna had designed them to be highly contagious among the target species, but completely harmless to humans and other servitor races. It was genocide, precise and scientific. She accepted that label. The Council had decided that some species deserved to live freely, while others deserved chains. She had simply reversed the equation. On Earth, Mirai stood on the roof of a factory in Seoul looking at the sky. 20 years ago, she had watched alien ships descend to enslave her people. Now she would watch those ships burn. She raised her hand and signaled to the resistance cells across the city. In response, the factories revealed their secret purpose. Doors that had seemed decorative slid open. Platforms that had appeared to be structural rose into firing positions. And the ships began to launch. They were crude compared to alien vessels built with stolen technology and human ingenuity. But there were thousands of them, rising from cities across the planet. The occupation forces tried to respond, but their communications were jammed by systems that Jinwu had compromised months ago. Their weapons systems malfunctioned, sabotaged by human technicians who had maintained them. Their ships found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered by pilots who fought with the desperation of people who had nothing left to lose. The Battle of Earth lasted 6 hours. At the end, the occupation forces were destroyed. The few surviving aliens were given no quarter. Humans who had suffered under their rule for 20 years ensured that every last one of them died. Mirai watched it all with cold satisfaction. This was her planet. This was her home. And she had taken it back with fire and blood. High Arbiter Thelvan received the reports in his chambers on Valara Prime. At first, he thought there must be some mistake. Humans could not organize a rebellion of this scale. They were primitives, barely capable of maintaining the technology they had been given. But the reports kept coming. 200 colonies lost, orbital platforms captured or destroyed, plague outbreaks in 17 systems, a slave revolt on Earth itself. The impossible was happening. He immediately convened an emergency session of the Council. The representatives who could reach Valara Prime quickly enough gathered in the Great Chamber. Panic showed on faces that usually displayed only arrogance. Some demanded immediate military response. Others argued for negotiation. A few suggested abandoning human-occupied systems entirely and establishing a quarantine. Thelvan listened to them all and made his decision. He would send the Morvathi war fleet. The fleet had never been defeated in 3,000 years of service. It consisted of 5,000 ships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering. They carried weapons capable of sterilizing planets, shields that could withstand sustained nuclear bombardment, and crews that had trained for centuries. Thelvan ordered them to Earth with simple instructions. Destroy the rebellion. Make an example of the humans. Show the galaxy what happened to slaves who forgot their place. Admiral Hana had not expected to survive the initial invasion 20 years ago. Her ship had been destroyed, but she had made it to an escape pod. She had been captured and sent to a labor camp. She had endured starvation, beatings, and endless work, but she had never stopped being a soldier. When the uprising began, resistance cells freed her from the camp. They brought her to a hidden shipyard that humans had been building in the asteroid belt. The fleet she now commanded was nowhere near as powerful as the Morvathi force approaching Earth. But it did not need to be. Tae Yang had taught them how to build ships quickly using modular designs. Yuna had ensured the crews were healthy and enhanced with stimulants that improved reaction times. Hyun had trained the tactical officers in asymmetric warfare, and Hana brought them all together with a strategy that relied on humanity's greatest strength. They could accept casualties that would break any other species. They could sacrifice themselves without hesitation. They could look at impossible odds and attack anyway. The Battle of Luna began when the Morvathi fleet entered the Earth-Moon system. Hana's ships struck from multiple directions, using the moon itself for cover. They accepted horrific losses, with dozens of human ships destroyed for every alien vessel they took down. But the humans kept coming. They rammed damaged ships into enemy vessels. They used debris fields as weapons. They fought with a ferocity that the Morvathi had never encountered. These were not soldiers fighting for territory or resources. These were victims fighting for revenge. The battle raged for 6 days. The space around Luna became a graveyard of shattered ships and floating corpses. Hana's flagship, the Retribution, took so much damage that half the crew died, but she kept fighting, kept coordinating, kept pushing forward, and slowly, impossibly, the Morvathi began to retreat. They had won every engagement by technical standards, but the humans would not stop coming. For the first time in their history, the invincible fleet turned around and fled. Jinwoo sat in a stolen communication center on a captured station, his fingers moving across multiple keyboards simultaneously. He had been preparing for this moment since the uprising began. Now, with the Morvathi retreat confirmed, he launched the final part of his plan. He hijacked every communication network in Council space, overriding security with codes he had painstakingly collected over years of work. And he broadcast a message from Mirai that would echo across 1,000 worlds. Her face appeared on screens throughout the galaxy. Her voice was calm, but her words carried the weight of absolute conviction. She told the Council and all who served them that humanity had been enslaved unjustly. She detailed the vote that had condemned them, the years of suffering, the casual cruelty of their oppressors. And then she delivered the warning that would define the new era. Humanity had learned what the galaxy truly was. They had learned that mercy was weakness and peace was a lie. They would not stop until every species that supported their enslavement had paid the price. The Council had forged humans into weapons. Now they would learn what those weapons could do. The galaxy burned and humanity held the torch. 3 months after the initial uprising, 17 species had been completely destroyed. Their homeworlds were dead, their colonies abandoned, their entire civilizations erased from existence. The Council, which had ruled for 10,000 years, fragmented into desperate factions as member species turned on each other in panic. Some tried to negotiate with the humans. Some tried to fight. Some tried to hide. None of it mattered. Humanity's fury was patient, methodical, and absolute. Yun commanded the liberation fleets that swept through former Council space. His forces freed not just humans, but all servitor species, the thousands of civilizations that had been enslaved over millennia. To these freed people, he showed compassion and offered support. But to the species that had benefited from slavery, he showed nothing but violence. His ships arrived at worlds that thought themselves safe, too distant or too unimportant to be targets. They learned otherwise when their cities burned. The planet Corvin had been a jewel of the Council, a world of art and culture built on the backs of slave labor. Its people, the Corveshi, were philosophers and artists who spent their lives in contemplation, while others did the physical work. They had voted for humanity's enslavement without hesitation, seeing nothing wrong with their lifestyle. When Hyun's fleet appeared in their orbit, they broadcast messages of confusion. They claimed they had never harmed anyone, that they were peaceful people who only wanted to create beauty. Hyun's response was broadcast across the planet. He told them that peace built on slavery was no peace at all. He told them that art created while others suffered was worthless. He told them they had 24 hours to evacuate their major cities before bombardment began. Many Corveshi did not believe him, could not imagine that anyone would actually destroy such cultural treasures. They remained in their homes surrounded by sculptures and paintings, certain that reason would prevail. When the bombardment began, 4 billion Corveshi died in the first hour. Their art burned with them. Ta Yang's greatest creation was nearing completion in a hidden facility in the asteroid belt. It was called the Sunbreaker, a weapon that made nuclear bombs look primitive. The technology came from Council archives, designs for weapons so terrible that even the Council had agreed never to build them. But humans had no such restrictions. Taeyang had spent months assembling the device with help from the best engineers in the Resistance. The target had been chosen carefully, Velara Prime, where the Council had voted to enslave humanity. The weapon was loaded onto a cargo ship disguised to look damaged and drifting. It approached Velara Prime broadcasting distress signals, claiming to be refugees seeking sanctuary. The station's defenses let it through, unwilling to destroy what appeared to be civilians. The ship docked at a commercial port, and Taeyang, watching from a command center 3 systems away, activated the Sunbreaker. The explosion was visible from neighboring star systems. Velara Prime, the great station that had stood for 5,000 years, simply ceased to exist. The blast wave consumed everything within a light minute, including 36 ships and 2 nearby planets. 3 billion aliens died instantly, vaporized before they could even understand what was happening. Taeyang watched the readings and felt nothing. This was mathematics. The Council had enslaved billions of humans. He had killed billions of aliens. The equation balanced. Dr. Yuna's plagues continued to spread. The Morvathi Empire, which had led the vote for human enslavement, was dying. The disease she had designed for them was particularly cruel. It turned their regenerative abilities into a nightmare, causing their bodies to grow tumors and mutations that would not stop. They could not die quickly because their biology kept trying to heal them. They suffered for weeks before finally succumbing. Yuna had designed it that way deliberately. She wanted them to understand suffering before the end. The Ishari Collective faced a different kind of death. Their telepathic network, which connected every member of their species, became a transmission vector for a neurological plague. As one Ishari died, their death screams echoed through the minds of all others. The psychological trauma was as deadly as the disease itself. Entire populations went insane before the virus finished killing them. Yuna documented the effects clinically, noting how different species responded to biological warfare. The knowledge would be useful if any other species ever threatened humanity again, but not all humans agreed with the path they were taking. On a liberated colony world, a former slave named Subin stood before a crowd of freed humans and aliens. She spoke about what they were becoming. She pointed out that they had destroyed species that included children, elderly, and innocents who had no voice in the Council's decision. She asked if this was really justice or simply revenge wearing justice's mask. Her words found support among some humans, particularly those who had been enslaved, but not brutalized as severely as others. They argued that humanity should stop, that enough blood had been spilled. They proposed offering peace to any species that surrendered and agreed to universal abolition of slavery. They believed that humanity could take the moral high ground and build a better galaxy from the ashes of the Council. Mirai traveled to the colony to personally respond to Subin's movement. The 2 women met in a public forum, broadcast to every human settlement. Subin made her case passionately, arguing that continued slaughter would make humans into the monsters they claimed to fight. Mirai listened patiently, then responded with cold logic. She reminded everyone of the vote. 847 to 0. Not one species had spoken against enslaving humanity. Not one civilization had offered mercy or doubt. She told them about the classified report that Jinwu had found, the one proving that humanity's enslavement was premeditated and calculated. The Council had not acted in ignorance or fear. They had acted with full knowledge of what they were doing, and they had done it because they could, because they saw humans as less than people. Mirai asked the crowd a simple question. If they stopped now, if they showed mercy, what would prevent this from happening again to another species in 1,000 years? The only way to ensure safety was to eliminate the threat completely. The debate raged for weeks. Subin's faction grew, particularly among younger humans who had not suffered as long under slavery. But Mirai's argument was stronger. She had the support of Taeyang, Yuna, and Hyun. She had the backing of humans who had lost everything to the Council. And most importantly, she had the weight of 20 years of suffering behind her words. The decision was made. The war would continue until the Council and all who supported it were destroyed. The Empire of Voss tried to negotiate. They were Eternals, beings who lived for thousands of years and saw themselves as wise beyond mortal understanding. They sent ambassadors to human-controlled space, offering reparations and formal apologies. They claimed they had voted for enslavement reluctantly, pressured by more aggressive species. They promised to support humanity's right to independence if only the attacks would stop. Their ambassadors arrived on a human station carrying gifts and proposals for peace. Admiral Hana received them personally. She listened to their speeches and read their proposals. Then she had the ambassadors executed and their bodies returned to Voss in coffins marked with a simple message. The time for negotiation was before the vote, not after. The Eternals had lived for thousands of years. They would not live to see another century. Hana dispatched fleets to every Voss colony. The Eternals discovered that longevity meant nothing when your entire species was being systematically exterminated. The Dracon Confederacy, which controlled 300 systems, attempted to mount a serious military resistance. They formed an alliance with 6 other species and assembled a fleet of 10,000 ships. It was the largest military force gathered in modern galactic history. They believed that surely humans could not stand against such overwhelming power. They were wrong. Hyun's forces engaged them in the Krakon Nebula, using the dense gas clouds for cover. The battle lasted 2 weeks and became known as the Graveyard Campaign. Human ships, still inferior in technology, used tactics that no civilized species would consider. They hid weapons in refugee vessels. They used captured aliens as shields. They deployed biological weapons mid-battle that killed everyone on targeted ships, alien and human alike. They accepted casualty rates of 70% and kept fighting. The Alliance fleet broke after losing half its ships. The survivors scattered, abandoning their home systems to seek safety elsewhere. Hyun pursued them relentlessly. He hunted down every ship, tracked every refugee convoy, located every hidden colony. He made it clear that there would be no escape and no sanctuary. The Dracon Confederacy and its allies ceased to exist within 6 months. High Arbiter Thelvan, ancient and desperate, assembled the last loyal forces of the Council on the fortress world of Koresh. It was a planet-sized military installation, built during the Council's early wars and never conquered in its long history. He broadcast a message to humanity from its command center. His voice, which had once declared humanity's enslavement with such confidence, now trembled with something he had never experienced before. Fear. He admitted that the Council had made a mistake. He acknowledged that humanity had been wronged. He offered full reparations, including giving humans control of 100 systems and seats on a reformed council. He promised that slavery would be abolished forever and that humans would be recognized as equals. He begged with all the dignity he could muster for mercy. Just this once. Just for the children and innocents who had nothing to do with the vote. Please. Admiral Hana commanded the assault on Koresh personally. She brought every available ship, even damaged vessels held together by makeshift repairs. The bombardment began before Thelvan finished his plea. Human ships hammered the fortress world's shields with everything they had. When the shields fell, they deployed weapons that Taeyang had designed specifically for this moment. Weapons that burrowed deep into the planet's crust and detonated at strategic points. Weapons that turned the fortress into a tomb. The planet burned for 3 months. The fires could be seen from neighboring systems. Thelvan died in the command center, buried under rubble, calling desperately for rescue that never came. With him died the last remnants of the Council's central authority. The galaxy entered a new age, one where humanity stood alone at the top, covered in the blood of 53 extinct civilizations. Subin watched the burning of Koresh from a refugee ship and wept. Not for the aliens, but for what humanity had become. She knew that what they had done could never be undone. The question now was whether they could live with themselves afterward, whether they could build something better than what they had destroyed, or whether they would simply become new tyrants, their hands stained with genocide, their hearts hardened beyond redemption. She decided she would keep fighting for humanity's soul even if it seemed already lost. The war ended not with a treaty, but with silence. The species that had formed the Galactic Council were dead, or reduced to scattered populations hiding in the dark spaces between stars. 53 civilizations had been completely erased from existence. 200 more had been bombed back to pre-industrial technology, their cities' ruins, their knowledge destroyed. The galactic economy collapsed. Trade routes that had existed for thousands of years went dark. Trillions of beings, many of them innocent of any crime, died from starvation, disease, and violence in the chaos that followed. Humanity stood victorious over the ashes of the galaxy they had burned, but victory felt hollow to many who had fought for it. The humans who had lived through the war were not the same people who had been enslaved. They had transformed themselves into something terrible and efficient, a species that could commit genocide without flinching. And now they had to figure out what to do with that power. The tribunal convened in Geneva, rebuilt from the ruins of Earth's occupation. It was humanity's attempt to judge itself, to determine whether what they had done was justice or simply revenge. The four pillars Taeyang, Yuna, Hyun, and Mirai stood before their own people to answer for the billions they had killed. Subin led the prosecution, arguing that they had gone too far, that they had become the monsters they claimed to fight. The trial lasted 6 months. Evidence was presented in exhaustive detail. Videos of destroyed worlds, populations burning, children dying in plagues designed to kill entire species. Witnesses testified about atrocities committed by human forces. Former slaves spoke about how liberation had turned into extermination. The prosecution built a case that humanity had crossed moral lines that should never be crossed, even in the pursuit of freedom. Taeyang defended his actions without apology. He explained how he had built weapons from scraps over 20 years. He described watching fellow humans die in the mines while alien overseers laughed. He showed calculations proving that if humanity had not struck with overwhelming force, they would have been destroyed in retaliation. He argued that the council understood only power, and mercy would have been seen as weakness. He had no regrets because regrets would not bring back the 20 years stolen from his life. Dr. Yuna's testimony was clinical and disturbing. She detailed exactly how she had designed each plague, how she had tested them, how she had ensured maximum suffering for the target species. She was asked if she felt any guilt for the children who had died from her diseases. She responded that she felt exactly as much guilt as the council members who had separated human children from their parents, which was to say none at all. The courtroom fell silent after that answer. Hyun spoke about the battles he had fought and the orders he had given. He admitted that his forces had committed what would be called war crimes if such laws still existed. They had used prisoners as shields. They had executed surrendering enemies. They had deployed weapons that killed indiscriminately. He explained that in war against an overwhelming enemy, you used whatever worked. Honor was a luxury for people who could afford to lose. Humans could not afford to lose even once. Mirai's testimony lasted for 3 days. She recounted the history of humanity's enslavement, detail by detail. She named the species who had voted for it. She showed evidence of the premeditated nature of the council's decision. She described the suffering of billions of humans over 20 years. And then she addressed the court with words that would be remembered for generations. She said they had not started this war. They had simply finished it. If that made them monsters, then so be it. But their children would be free, and no council would ever chain humanity again. The tribunal deliberated for weeks. The judges struggled with an impossible question. How do you judge people who committed genocide in response to their own enslavement? How do you balance the suffering humanity endured against the suffering they inflicted? How do you determine where justice ends and revenge begins? In the end, they could not reach a verdict. Some judges argued for conviction. Some argued for acquittal. Some argued that the entire trial was meaningless because there was no higher authority to enforce any judgment. The four pillars were neither condemned nor exonerated. They were released without a formal verdict, leaving humanity to grapple with its own conscience. Some humans celebrated them as heroes who had saved their species. Others saw them as war criminals who had stained humanity's honor forever. Most fell somewhere in between, understanding why they had done what they did while wishing there had been another way. But the galaxy did not care about humanity's internal debates. What mattered was power, and humanity now had more of it than any other species. Admiral Hana was appointed to lead the new Terran Authority, a military organization tasked with enforcing order in the post-Council galaxy. She established a single law that would govern all of space. Any species that practiced slavery of sentient beings would face complete extinction. No warnings, no second chances. Just elimination enforcement fleets patrolled constantly, investigating any reports of servitude. When they found evidence of slavery, they acted with swift brutality. A species called the Relmech, who had not been part of the council, was discovered keeping another species as workers. The Terran Authority gave them 72 hours to free their slaves and dismantle their economy. The Relmech government protested, claiming their system was different, that their workers were treated well. Hana's response was to demonstrate what human weapons could do to a planet. The Relmech complied immediately afterward. The galaxy lived in fear of human judgment. Species that had once been powerful now watched the sky nervously, worried that some past action might bring humanity's wrath down upon them. Trade resumed slowly but under human supervision. Technology was shared, but humans controlled who got what. Laws were established, but humans enforced them. The galaxy had replaced one tyranny with another, though this tyranny at least opposed slavery. Not everyone accepted humanity's rule. Resistance movements formed among species that resented human dominance. Some argued that humans had no right to dictate morality to civilizations older than Earth itself. Others pointed out that humanity had committed worse crimes than many of those they punished. A few brave or foolish leaders spoke openly about human hypocrisy, about how they had become the thing they hated. These voices were silenced quickly, not through execution or imprisonment, but through isolation. Species that opposed human rule found themselves cut off from trade networks, denied access to technology, and left to survive on their own. It was not genocide, but it was effective. Most species learned to keep their objections quiet and accept the new order. Jinwu, who had helped spark the rebellion with his discovery of the Council's classified files, became humanity's chief explorer. He led missions beyond former Council space, making contact with civilizations that had never been part of the galactic community. These species had developed in isolation, knowing nothing of the Council or its slave trade. Meeting them forced humanity to confront an uncomfortable question. Could they be something other than conquerors and avengers? The first contact was with a species called the Miri, peaceful beings who had just achieved faster-than-light travel. They greeted the human ships with curiosity and friendship, offering to share knowledge and culture. Jinwu found himself uncertain how to respond. Humanity had spent so long preparing for war that they had almost forgotten how to pursue peace. The Miri knew nothing of what humans had done, saw them only as potential friends. Jinwu decided to keep it that way. Some truths did not need to be shared. Dr. Yuna, haunted by nightmares of the plagues she had created, began establishing medical missions to surviving worlds. She traveled to planets devastated by the war and treated the sick and injured. She trained local doctors and distributed medicine freely. Some saw it as penance. Yuna saw it as practical. The galaxy needed healing, and she had the knowledge to provide it. Whether it absolved her of guilt was irrelevant. The work needed doing. Taiyang started teaching engineering to young humans and aliens alike. He opened schools where anyone could learn to build and create. He shared human innovations freely, believing that knowledge should not be hoarded. His students asked him about the war, about the weapons he had designed. He told them honestly what he had done and why. He did not tell them it was right. He told them it was necessary. There was a difference, though he was not sure he could explain it. Hyun transformed from a warrior into something unexpected. He trained peacekeepers, soldiers whose job was to protect rather than destroy. He taught them the tactics he had learned but emphasized restraint and discipline. He told them that the easy path was violence that any fool could kill. The hard path was knowing when not to kill, when to show strength through mercy. His students wondered if he was the same man who had burned worlds. He wondered the same thing. Mireille stepped down from leadership, spending her final years working with Subin to establish universal rights for all sentient beings. They created laws protecting species from exploitation, ensuring that what happened to humanity could never happen again. They argued constantly about how to balance security with freedom, about whether humanity's military dominance was protecting the galaxy or oppressing it. They never fully agreed, but they kept working together. On Earth, in the ruins of Sol where the first humans had been taken as slaves, humanity built a monument unlike any other. It was not a celebration of victory. It was a reminder of cost. One wall listed every human who had died during the 20 years of slavery. Millions of names carved into black stone. Another wall listed every species humanity had destroyed in the war that followed. 53 civilizations, their names in their own languages, preserved so they would not be forgotten. The central monument was a simple statement carved in letters 50 meters high. It read, "Never again for anyone." The words were translated into every known language, including dead languages of extinct species. Humans came to the monument to remember. Some came to mourn. Some came to justify. Some came to question. All came to ensure that the future would know exactly what had happened and what it had cost. Subin stood before the monument often in her old age. She had never stopped fighting for humanity's conscience, never stopped arguing that they needed to be better than their enemies. She had not won that fight. Humanity had become exactly what was needed to survive, which meant becoming terrible. But perhaps her fight had not been pointless. Perhaps the fact that humans still debated their actions, still questioned themselves, meant there was hope for redemption. Jinwoo made a discovery in his exploration beyond Council space. He found evidence of another civilization that had faced a similar choice to humanity. They had been enslaved, had fought back, and had destroyed their oppressors. But they had not stopped there. They had become conquerors themselves, spreading across space and subjugating everyone they encountered. Eventually, they had destroyed themselves in civil war, unable to exist without an enemy to fight. The discovery terrified human leadership. It showed them a possible future, one where humanity's victory led only to more violence and eventual self-destruction. It raised the question of whether they could escape that cycle, whether they could hold power without being corrupted by it, whether they could remember what they fought for instead of just what they fought against. 50 years after the war ended, the last of the 4 pillars died. Mirai passed away in her sleep, surrounded by friends and former enemies who had learned to respect her. Her funeral was attended by humans and aliens alike. Some came to honor her. Some came to protest her legacy. Most came because they understood that she represented something important. A moment when humanity had chosen survival over morality and had to live with that choice forever. The galaxy continued. New civilizations developed. Old ones rebuilt. Trade routes reopened. Art and culture flourished in ways they never had under the Council. Humanity's iron rule gradually relaxed as generations passed who had not lived through the slavery. Young humans grew up in a galaxy where they were the dominant power, and they took that dominance for granted. They did not understand what their ancestors had endured or what they had done to survive. The monument in Seoul ensured they would learn. Every human child was brought there at least once to see the names and read the history. They were told the whole truth, not a sanitized version. They learned that their ancestors had been victims who became monsters in order to survive. They learned that the price of freedom had been paid in alien blood. And they were told that they carried the responsibility to ensure it never happened again, in any direction. The final words carved at the base of the monument were a question without an answer. Were we right? The letters were small, easy to miss, but placed deliberately where people would see them only after viewing everything else. It was humanity's admission that they did not know, that perhaps they would never know. They had made a choice in fire and blood. History would judge whether it was the right one. But in the present moment, humanity existed free. Children played without chains. Adults worked by choice, not compulsion. The galaxy operated under laws that protected the weak from the strong. And if those laws were enforced by the threat of extinction, if peace was maintained through fear of human weapons, if freedom came with the cost of 53 dead civilizations, then that was the price that had been paid. Whether it was worth it remained a question each person had to answer for themselves.